History tells one kind of story about the past. Art offers an entirely different lens. That is clear from the work of pioneering German graphic designer and sculptor Käthe Kollwitz, whose work captures moments from the height of Germany's empire through its descent into 20th century war. Her work continues to collect admirers to this day. And one of them, Dr. Brian McCrindle, a pediatric cardiologist with the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, became one of the most serious collectors of her work, the body of which he has now donated to the Art Gallery of Ontario. And he joins us now for more. Dr. McCrindle, good to meet you.
Thank you.
I just want to set this up because I presume that not all of our viewers know about Käthe Kollwitz, so let's start with some background, shall we? In 1967, the centenary of her birth, German critic Gottfried Sello summed up this approach to her work in the West German weekly Die Zeit, writing, "In spite of her progressive ideas, Kollwitz is an arch-conservative artist. But what does this perceived conservatism mean? German conservatives admire her artistic craftsmanship and, perhaps tainted by ambiguous nostalgia, the fact that she is a witness of the period of the German Kaiser. Meanwhile, the left celebrates her anti-war stance and the class consciousness reflected in her art. And the feminist movement identifies Kollwitz as a role model who challenged the misogyny in the art institutions of the time and helped to pave the way for later generations of women artists." Okay, that's their description. Brian, what would yours be?
So I would agree that she probably is, to some extent, elements of all of those things. But when I come to her art, I primarily see her as a deeply compassionate humanitarian.
How so?
She was very much interested more in the worker, in the proletariat. She found those subjects much more compelling and much more beautiful than the usual subjects of the day, which were, the rich, the famous, the monarchy, etc. She found them much more compelling, much more beautiful. Early in her career, as a young girl, she wandered the streets of her hometown, Königsberg, and these were sort of the subjects that she sought out.
So she had that direct connection to those images, which
she did.
Later informed her work. How did you get onto her stuff in the first place?
When you get into medical school, you're kind of shot down a tunnel of the sciences, and I've always been interested in the arts, and eventually I got to a stage in my training where I could take a night off. And where I was training, I was allowed to take evening studies courses for free at the university.
Which one?
At Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
And so
Johns Hopkins is Baltimore?
Is Baltimore.
Okay.
And so one of the things I always enjoyed but knew nothing about was 20th century painting and sculpture. And as it turns out, as we were surveying the artists during that period, Kollwitz was one of the artists that was briefly mentioned.
And as you looked at it, what touched you in particular?
It was really the expression and the emotion and the power in her work that really got me at first.
Had you ever heard of her before that?
I had. The Baltimore Museum of Art, I used to go there all the time as well, had a cast of her sculpture, The Tower of Mothers. And it was a very early and important cast, and I used to just love to go, and it's a sculpture that you need to walk around. And it's really a powerful piece. It shows the solidarity of mothers, like a herd of musk oxen with the young on the inside, protecting them from being sacrificed in the machinery of war.
I don't want to draw parallels that aren't there, but in some respects, that's kind of what you do for a living as well, isn't it? I mean, your job is to kind of protect patients who go in there seeking help.
Yes, being a medical physician, you are very much in the business of compassion. And I think Kollwitz's art, once you get past the first looking at it and seeing the suffering and the tragedy and the devastation, you can, if you stare at it long enough and think about it long enough, you can eventually bridge your way to see how compassionately she actually approached these subjects. And certainly compassion is one of the key components to providing really good medical care, especially for children.
Indeed. She said in her diaries, quote, "I had the misfortune to be born a girl." How did that hold her back?
So early on, she wasn't allowed to study in the usual academies of art. She was sent to Munich and Berlin to study specifically in women's art schools. I'm sure that in those schools, her subject matter was limited to things that were felt to be suitably genteel. She certainly didn't pursue those themes in her career. And it certainly did color the way that people would look at her and advance her work.
She did get married.
She did get married.
Did that hold her back at all?
I think that was actually one of the things that allowed her to become a successful artist. She married a very sympathetic husband. And she also chose a medium, primarily prints and drawings, that she could pick up and put down while she was raising two busy boys, while she was helping her husband in his practice.
We should just, I guess, put her in her time. She's born a week after Canada, right?
Yes.
It's July 8th, 1867. And her life obviously spans some of the most catastrophic events in world history, right? The unification of German states, World War I, World War II. She sees all of this, the rise of the German Empire. And she dies in 45, I guess. She dies right around the same time Hitler died.
She dies, she actually did not get to see the end of World War II. She died 2 or 3 weeks just before
the end.
Okay,
how did all of that, the enormity of all of what she saw, how do you think that affected her work?
Profoundly. She, however, saw these events sort of from the bottom. So her physician husband actually worked in a sort of in the early, what would be considered public insurance. So they lived in a very poor suburb of Berlin. His clinic saw people as they came in, the poor, the suffering. Her studio was actually right next to his office. They lived above his clinic. And this was the perspective with which she saw the events of her times.
How did the public during her time react to her work?
It took her a while to get recognition because the people that were judging her were primarily men, including Kaiser Wilhelm II, who, when she was going to be awarded a gold medal, took it away and said, "This is gutter art. And besides, medals belong on the chests of deserving men." Now, nonetheless, that did give her a certain notoriety that helped to push her forward. Also, early in her career, she worked with subject matter and in a manner that was more masculine than what people were used to seeing from women artists.
So I gather she was not a fan of the Kaiser and he not of her.
No.
No, okay. She did a lot of self-portraits. There's going to be a documentary about her life on later tonight, 10 o'clock. And we learn in that documentary she did hundreds of self-portraits. How come?
So there are many reasons why she didn't really document very well in her diaries why she did so many self-portraits. So we're left to sort of surmise why she might have done so. You know, one reason is that, you know, in busy times raising a family, she was a readily available model. Also, it was a way that she could work out different techniques and different ways of expressing things. But eventually, the self-portraits grew to something beyond that, and she sort of became an archetypical figure. She started incorporating her self-portrait herself into some of the work that she did. It was just a recognizable feature. She knew how to show her own face, how to show it in various expressions and in various media. So it was an important part of both her development and both her means of expression.
Now, if we can make a comparison to another very famous female German artist of the time, a lot of people have heard of Leni Riefenstahl, and she was somewhat close, you can argue how much, to the regime at the time, to Hitler's regime. Kollwitz was exactly the opposite, right? She became quite an anti-war spokesperson, is that right?
Yes, her prior to the beginning of World War I, she explored themes of revolution in her work, albeit revolutions that were effectively quelched. However, right at the beginning of the First World War, her youngest son, Peter, wanted to enlist, and he needed, because he was underage, needed the permission of his father, and his father wasn't going to give it without some intercession by his mother. So his mother had to reluctantly agree to this and convince Carl to allow Peter to enlist. However, it was only a few weeks later he was one of the first killed in the war in Belgium. And I think she suffered a tremendous amount of grief over that for years afterwards, but also probably some guilt as well. And I think that changed her stance on revolution and revolt to become very much anti-war.
We've got a clip on this from the documentary, which will air, as we say, at 10 o'clock tonight. Sheldon, go.
In 1932, a memorial was erected at a soldiers' cemetery in Flanders, near the place where Peter was killed.
The loss of life was enormous, and she was concerned, fixated on commemoration of her son, and her son, not just for himself, but what, he obviously represented a whole generation, many, many others who'd been killed from the moment of his death. So it preoccupies her throughout the war, when she wasn't producing a great deal of work, and then, of course, comes to fruition in various ways afterwards.
This portrayal of grief really becomes her calling card. And why does it speak to you so significantly?
So I think Kollwitz, because she saw suffering and social ills and the patients that came to Carl's clinic, probably had a different view of death than the average person who greatly fears death. She worked through sort of her feelings through death, have much more nuance to them and many different spectrums to it. So as a physician, we will sometimes see where death is not just a tragic event, an end to life, but it's also an end to suffering. And I think she also understood that aspect. And when it came later in her career, when she turned and did an entire lithographic series about death, she further explored some of those themes where death is both the taker, but also sometimes a comfort as well.
I don't want to push this comparison too far, but you as a doctor would see a lot of misery. I mean, you see a lot of happy things, obviously, when you cure people, but you see misery as well. Is that a connecting point for you too as well?
Yes, it is a connecting point. And a lot of times people ask me, why do you collect this depressing art? and the reason is because I can look beyond it and see the compassion that goes into it. One of the things that our art really does quite well is it instills empathy in people. People can, if they look at it long enough, it incites feelings to them. If they think about it long enough, instead of just feeling and putting themselves into the subject's sort of life and shoes, you can eventually get to the point where you start to feel compassion towards those subjects. And then hopefully it can lead you to action. And that's where I think the humanitarianism comes in.
She fell out of favor for a time. How come?
She fell out of favor because she, in 1933, as the Nazi Party was coming into power, you can imagine they wouldn't be very happy with her type of art. And so while they did threaten her, they didn't really do anything other than that except completely forbid her from exhibiting and forbidding other dealers from exhibiting her work. And for an artist who was really viewed herself as having a purpose in being the voice of the people, being silenced like that would have been completely devastating. And also she sort of dropped off because she wasn't being seen, but also because the issues that she was trying to bring to the fore were really starting to get completely swept under the carpet.
Do we know if she ever met Hitler or had any Confrontation with the Third Reich, anything like that?
No, the Gestapo did come once to her doorstep to question her and intimidate her, but I think that was the limit of her contact with the Nazi Party.
Gotcha. Let's, Sheldon, bottom page 3, let's bring up some pictures now, because I want Brian McCrindle to tell us about some of his favorite work. And let's start with this, Brian. What's this one?
So this is called A Visit to a Children's Hospital, and it truly is a
Well, that hits you
favorite
where you
of mine.
live, of course, yes.
And this would have been a scene that she probably would have seen as she was accompanying her husband Carl on his rounds. And what she's done here is she depicts a mother and a father visiting their sick child, encouraging the child to drink from a cup. The way she brings us into this group is because she creates a very dense cluster of figures. All the heads are together. She darkens it in a little bit in the middle, but it's kind of like as you focus on something, you see the central point and everything else dissolves in the periphery, and that's why you see that the chair and other elements are less well formed. It's really a tender little moment, a tender, intimate moment of this family.
And I bet you have seen that at Sick Kids Hospital hundreds and hundreds of times over the years.
Yes, I have.
Just a moment like that. How many of her pieces have you collected?
So I probably have collected, it's hard to keep the number because the number keeps changing. And I'm still occasionally buying work, but I probably had about 185 prints, drawings, and sculptures. But I've also, because I really am interested in her life and and how she came to do these images, I also have collected some letters, catalogs, photographs, other sorts of archival material, because I think I really wanted to understand her and her art in a complete manner.
Let me ask a real crass capitalist question here. What's the most you ever paid for one of her pieces?
Oh, I'm not the most exorbitant Kollwitz collector in the world. So there's, at the time that I was actively collecting, there was a Kollwitz collector, Dr. Richard Sims in Los Angeles. And then there's the Kollwitz Museum in Cologne, and the Kollwitz Museum is owned by a bank, and Richard Sims has a very large orthodontic practice. And really, they were the two competitors who, if something really important came on the market, they would sort of compete it out. That doesn't mean that there weren't lots of other works that I was able to acquire. But I was sort of left with the spoils a lot of time, or when they weren't paying attention, things that they overlooked.
You dodged my question there a little bit, didn't you?
So it's hard to say because I rarely pay for anything in Canadian currency because it comes from Germany, Switzerland, or the U.S. But I would say the most expensive thing I have is a beautiful, beautiful sculpture called Soldiers' Wives Waving Farewell, which I paid about $100,000 for.
Wow, okay, so big time stuff.
But it's an important cast. It's a cast that was done in her lifetime. She never exhibited it. It actually had its first showing in New York.
All right, in our last minute here then, tell us why you ultimately decided to donate so much of your collection to the Art Gallery of Ontario.
Well, first of all, they have a long-standing interest in Kollwitz. They had a number of Kollwitz works before I even got on their radar screen, and had a Kollwitz exhibition in 2003. And it's at that point that I became known to them. And then they have been sort of courting me for a long time. Eventually, they were really interested in getting me to donate the entire collection. I was a bit reluctant, but then I came to the realization that this art penultimately didn't belong to me. It belonged to everyone, and Kollwitz would have wanted it that way. She would have wanted her art seen. She would have wanted it shared and discussed in this current time.
Well, thank you very much for doing that. And thank you for coming in tonight to tell us all about it.
Oh, my pleasure.
That's Dr. Brian McCrindle.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.